the Northeast, we have the French Protoss player in blue. He is Lilbow.
And in the bottom left-hand side, it is the man with the lips on fire. It is Harstem. I think I know that because, yeah, I actually made artwork for that nickname, and it's one of Harstem's emotes these days. It's him with, it's a cartoon of him with fire lips.
Yeah, I've seen. He's got a little portrait in game, right? I think that's a defining feature of it. Maybe he has a couple. We've got we've got a nice repository of StarCraft history in the portraits tab. It's oft overlooked, rarely discussed, as two probes bump into each other. But there's a good selection of some exciting and handsome faces in there, cats.
Most def. And there's going to be 2 gateways going up on either side, so both players getting ready for a very standard PvP opening. And do you anticipate any deviations as far as the units that are going to be made here, Nate? It's a guessing game.
I think so. I mean, if you're Harstem, on paper, better player, better performance so far in this group, better results generally. And, you know, at least in the modern StarCraft era that we are in. But for Lilbow, you don't really have that pressure. Everybody has either counted you out, or now that you're 0-4 in the group, they've definitely counted you out. So the expectations are basically non-existent. Right. But you do still get money for winning a match, right? In all seriousness, he obviously wants to, you know, at least win a match, make some money. He's putting his time here. It's not like there's nothing else that he could be doing today, you know, other than showing up and playing these really difficult series. So I hope that we see something crazy out of him, because I don't know what else your expectations would be at this point. You haven't been able to take anybody else down in the group. There's been a lot of work that's been put in. So try to create those opportunities. Limit the length of the game so that your opponent doesn't have as much time to lean on their experience or whatever else it would be that they'd be depending on. Or, you know, the build orders, don't let it play out. Don't let them use any mechanical advantage they have to, you know, get more ahead as the game goes on. So I hope to see that. I want to see Lilbow get aggressive. I think there are limitations to what you can get away with in PvP, so it'll probably still be a somewhat normal start. But I can't say that Lilbow's got like a signature move or anything. I don't think I've been able to see enough of his games to make that kind of statement, cats.
Yeah, but I haven't played a lot against Lilbow in his prime. I mean, he was the best foreigner for a while, to be quite honest. Like, he was an unstoppable force as far as foreign players were concerned at a given point in time, right? And then he had that infamous tweet of preparing for Legacy of the Void, and then the infamous series against the man who is also infamous and shall not be named.
You say,
but
you say one dumb thing and it literally haunts you forever.
Yeah.
I know what that feels like. It's going to get brought up every time Lilbow plays a game of StarCraft. That's broadcasted for the rest of his life, and tragically, not much he can do about that.
Yeah, French players on Twitter, man. Yeah, not a fun combination, seemingly. But yeah, I mean, Lilbow at some point was one of the very best players in the game, and the reason why I think that's relevant to bring up is because even though, yeah, we haven't seen much of him recently, he was never known, and he never made that name by being cheesy or by being overly aggressive. In fact, he was quite a very strong macro player, and because of that, like, I don't really see him mixing it up, right? So that's part of why I can't also be like, yeah, let's give one map to Lilbow. Like, if it was like someone like Bly and we thought that he had a similar power level as Lilbow, yeah, maybe he can do something tricky, or a Hellraiser, or someone that's known for more cerebral and maybe less just standard and solid play. And the problem with these very solid players when they're in free fall is that, you know, if they meet a player that is equally or more solid than them, it's very difficult to cause upsets. So yes. Lilbow's gonna have to straight up outplay Harstem, and that's why I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think at StarCraft at its core, and what makes StarCraft as competitive of a game as it is, and it's called a real-time strategy, but the real-time has a way bigger impact for the most part. There's very rarely a situation where you're going to have a strategy that is so good it makes up for your opponent, you know, being twice as fast as you or something like that. Right. There's not, it's very rare that you'll see somebody in a pro level come out of nowhere and be like, I just have this build that nobody knows how to deal with, and I'm able to beat players that I would never beat otherwise. It just doesn't happen. So we have Harstem coming up with his Blink Stalkers, getting a little bit of poke, taking actually a decent amount of real damage onto his forces, but his third Nexus was done a decent little bit ahead of Lilbow, so not too much to worry about, as I think, yeah, +1 attack's going to be done a bit faster for Lilbow, but that's pretty much the only thing that really jumps out to me. So what I'm saying with this long-winded speech, Cats, is that I agree with you, and the strategy, as cool as it is, I feel like it mostly has an impact when the players are close together in skill level. That's when catching someone off guard really makes a big difference, because they don't have, they don't have mechanics to lean on to bring them out of the game if you get them behind, because again, if you're at the same level, you can usually manage.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, here comes Lilbow trying to apply some pressure. Actually gets ahead of his sentries as well. So this could be a little bit dangerous as the Immortal is flanking. I'm not sure that he has noticed. His screen may not be looking at that Immortal. So the Immortal doing a little bit of damage, and Harstem will actually come out of this engagement with a small advantage, picking off a couple of units, I believe, more than Lilbow did. Resources lost tab, though, however, shows that in spite of that, Harstem still trails by 25 resources. So, yeah, not too bad, all things said and done. And yeah, strategy, cool. And Lilbow, yeah, he could bring out something crazy. But if he was to bring out something crazy, Nate, he would be reinventing himself. And we know at the pro level,
yes,
and on a whim, it's just not something that you can do very easily, right? So yeah, and he actually always looked down. At the peak of his career, he looked down on gimmicks. Like, I know because I played show matches against him, right? And before the show match, he'd be like, yeah, I mean, like, like it's gonna be easy peasy. Like, Cats doesn't really have the mechanics. And I remember we had quite a close show match. He ended up winning because that was near the peak of my gaming career as well. And while he was a much better player, like I remember this because like I felt like he was talking down on my style, and I really wanted to put out a good fight against him, and I feel like I earned a little bit of his respect, but I earned it through playing those longer macro games. At that point in time was actually like the beginning of the Swarm Host era, and he felt like it was a little bit more difficult than he had anticipated. But all to my point that he's not a cheesy guy, and he doesn't look highly upon cheese, and he's not gonna come out with any surprising strategy. He's just gonna come out with what he made a name for himself, which is just solid macro play, but I don't think it's going to be solid enough to contest Harstem's. That said, Harstem with a very aggressive blink here to start things off on the third base of Lilbow. Lilbow actually going after the Warp Prism, but that leaves his Archons exposed, and Harstem taking a good engagement on the back of that. Now he will have to wait out for the battery overcharge to finish doing its thing, and then maybe he can look to re-engage.
I was going to say the shield battery overcharge ends up being like a somewhat mixed bag in terms of the usage. I love that he's able to blink for the prism, but I think you kind of got it perfectly. The Zealots were still on the left side, so Harstem did a great job keeping the Zealots onto the Stalkers, and all of his Stalkers were just shooting the Archons, and unfortunately Archons not super great against the Stalkers. So we see Lilbow, it's a bit of a back and forth, but we don't actually have too much of a chasm here, or a big gap, as we were saying. As the game goes longer, of course, more and more opportunities for the expression of skill are going to present themselves. This is why we usually talk about underdogs going for those types of cheesy builds. But you're right, Lilbow, he's going to play the honorable macro game. He's setting himself up. He's on 4 bases. Now he's trying to move out after defending that attack. If he shuts down Harstem's 4th, that's a big dub for him, because he's had this 4th base now for a little bit. Or for a little bout, you could almost say. So whether or not he can bring this pressure, these are the moments that decide and shape the way that the games in the series go. But pulls back. I think he's just waiting. He does have a prism, so it could just be for reinforcements to get in there again.
Yeah, and the angling is going to favor him. Harstem will spot him last second there with a Zealot. A lot of the charge of Lilbow has already been spent. On the other side, Harstem also trying to do something, but with the shield battery already connected onto that pylon or onto that cannon, it's gonna do just fine now with a small warping. Not too many Zealots committed there on the side of Harstem. Lilbow will manage to disengage on the south and is still warping in a lot of Zealots. And I mean, as far as cheesy is concerned, yeah, like a 10-minute timing with a lot of Zealots is something, but hey, don't go up that ramp. That's looking really scary to go up that ramp before the Zealots are fanned out. Harstem is actually gonna meet him with the brunt of his Archon force, and I think that this is going really well for the Dutch. Lilbow does have a lot of Zealot reinforcements being warped in, and they will potentially come in handy. Where are the reinforcements for Harstem? Nowhere to be seen just yet. Now 3 Zealots are coming in on the back, and with that, Lilbow will be defeated as far as all-ins are concerned, I mean, that was as all-in as Lilbow gets, I think. Harstem repels it ultimately, and yeah, it didn't look too pretty.
No. And again, he knows how to take the steps, right? He understands the build order. I think, especially with the pace of the way that StarCraft patches went since Lilbow's peak, it's not like we have the Nexus are all upside down. We didn't invert how pylons work. So he's still able to get that core up. He has the right army composition. But then you get into these situations where maybe he's like, okay, I want to attack. And then he hangs back, waits for the prism. It got poked down a little bit. Then he waits, goes for the attack a little bit later. Except now Harstem has seen that his opponent wants to come push him. He's on top of the ramp. He's spaced out. He knows exactly what he needs to do to win that fight, because that's just the situation that he's been in a million of times. And well, you can see there decision making coming in for the bit of a longer game. Lilbow tries to force a mostly melee army through a very small choke point on a ramp. Enough said.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Like, this is probably not the kind of tactic that Lilbow is very comfortable in doing. He's kind of trying to push the issue, and if you're gonna look to reinvent yourself to give yourself a chance, fair enough, but it's probably not gonna look pretty a lot of the time. And this time around, I wish he had just disengaged, looked for a better angle, and regrouped. But I can also see it, right? Like, he had his timing coming online. He had a lot of gateways that he had added for that timing, and he had a warping that he wanted to utilize in the short vicinity of time. So hard to blame him. He did what he could, but Harstem just proving that he's the more solid macro player. And I think as long as Harstem doesn't take any huge risks, second game I expect will unfold similarly.
Yeah, could not agree with you anymore. We're going to go to Gigantha for map number 2. So we'll just have to wait and see. Is Lilbow going to bring out something aggressive? Is he going to try and limit the amount of options that Harstem has to deal with whatever it is that he's going to do? Or is he going to say, okay, yeah, let's shake hands, do a normal macro build for both sides, and if you can simply outplay me, you're going to win. I won't rely on trickery. I won't try to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm just going to fight you head to head, mano y mano, and if you're stronger than me, I'm going to die. But I mean, if we want to see him get a match in this tournament, then I think a little bit more aggressive decision making has to be on the table, at least now, for this man in the Northeast, the blue Protoss player. He is. The graphic is not right. Lilbow is not Shopify Rebellion's Lambo. For anybody curious on that, we got it fixed. Awesome.
And the bottom left-hand side, it is for Team Liquid, Harstem, maker of the rank roulette, alongside much other highly anticipated and beloved content in our scene.
Oh yeah, it's become he's got like the PhD in StarCraft memes. He's up there with Loco now. Those guys they've got their finger on the pulse of the StarCraft community. They know what they want. Rank Roulette is a bit of a fun show to watch. I can't lie. Sometimes you tune in and you're like, how on earth could you possibly make these levels of mistakes? Got to be like bronze or silver. Like, no, this is actually straight up Master League guy. Yeah, he lost, but hey, maybe he was inebriated in this game, but bad guess.
And the opposite can also happen, actually. Like, there was this guy that was when I was on Rank Roulette, there was this guy, spoiler alert, I guess, but there was this guy who was microing his Reaper, and it was like crazy good. Like, he was blocking the drone from making the spore, to prevent it from making a spore.
And what did he get, like 3,000 minerals banked up while he was doing it?
Eventually, yeah, but I was so focused on the micro. I was like, this guy.
It was really, that micro for a brief moment was really good.
Really
Did I pay attention to anything else while I was microing that Reaper? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, that's where the real premium content comes from, because then all you do is crop the Reaper micro and you don't show the resources. Boom, you've got a great little mini highlight to pretend that you know what you're doing.
Yes, indeed.
There you go.
Alrighty. So, yeah, we see that Harstem is just chilling here. Double Adept on the side of Harstem. Actually, like, not usually the underdog type situation, right? Adepts are usually what the underdog does usually is to try to pull a fast one, to try to make Adepts work. Like, the more solid defensive option usually is going to be the Stalkers or Stalker Sentry, to kind of get that Sentry early on and to see what your opponent's doing. Lilbow will have a little bit of an edge, a tiny bit of an edge, in that he's going to be able to kill his pylon a lot faster than Harstem comparatively, who has adepts to do so. It's just not the preferred unit to do so. And so this pylon is going to be super annoying for Harstem, who is also having to drop a shield battery in the wake of seeing that there's stalkers potentially moving across the map and knowing that the stalkers know that there is adepts on his side and that there is sentries to follow up those adepts. So, I mean, Nate, Harstem, honestly, you know, like, I don't like it that much. It's, yeah. Defensive adepts, not my flavor.
Having to use the adepts defensively is one thing, but I think it's also worth keeping in mind that Lilbow's kind of gotten him to try to commit to defending this low ground base, especially with keeping those adepts home, because even though he had the tools to deal with a Nexus block in his own natural, he hasn't taken it. He's basically said, oh yeah, you're going to think that you have to be a little defensive and we're both going to expand and, you know, little handshake, nothing super crazy, but look at that. Voila. The proxy gateway outside the natural.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes against everything that we were preluding as far as Lilbow's style and whatnot is concerned. A couple of good force fields will almost net Harstem a win there onto that Stalker, but no, the Stalker will survive. And at the same time, Harstem has done the proper to scout the natural base of Lilbow. He knows that it's not there. Now he can commit to units. No more workers in production on the side of Harstem. An extra shield battery will also be added. And all he has to do is hold now. Lilbow, I mean, again, not particularly known, I think, for his aggression. But we've seen stuff like this work in the past. Stabilizing off of disruptors is an option that we saw just a couple of days ago, employed, I believe, by Hellraiser. I don't quite remember exactly, but it was on a map with a much chokier natural base.
Yeah, he's got enough stalkers to one-shot each of Harstem's, even within range of the shield battery. The Immortal does finish up, though, and with some force fields, Lilbow should be bleeding out a little bit. And there is, of course, the other battery. So the Immortal itself becomes incredibly hard to bring down. Get it? How many stalkers you need to one-shot an Immortal with full shields? Especially if that barrier comes back. Way too much. So there you go. Takes off some of the shields, but battery is doing its job. I think for Lilbow, though, this to me, it's like when you have a team that's just not as good as the other team, you don't only make conservative plays just because you think you can't take a big dub. He's trying to put himself in a position where he can, if he just does this one part right, take a map here, which, as we were talking about, is a huge deal for Harstem. We really can't afford to lose a single map in this series based on the standings of this group if he wants to keep moving up. So the pressure is on, but I mean, the natural does still have a decent bit of its shields left. Force fields are going to start to split apart. Has the one Immortal exposed out front. All the stalkers are trying to burst it down through the battery. It's just barely hanging on. The probes are out, and that is it. GG. Harstem takes the 2-0. But